Right, watch out, welcome back. Now today I want to show you something completely isolated. I've got to put some handlebars on the Street Fighter. So part of the Street Fighter build is not fun and games assembling fantastic parts. Some of it is just mind-numbing, boring engineering that you have to get done to move forward. You can't always buy a part and just bolt it on. Sometimes you have to modify it yourself. So come on in, Pen. If you've got a bolt like that, that's great because you can bolt something all the way down to the end if you need to. But if you've got a bolt like that and the thread doesn't go down far enough, you need to cut that thread. Sometimes it isn't a bolt. Sometimes it's a stud or it's a mounting and you need to cut that thread a bit further. So today, in a simple isolated video, just for the sake of your knowledge, you can learn something from this. I want to show you how to cut a thread further down a bolt so that you can use it rather than it bottoming out too early in the part of being bolted up tight. It's a really simple thing. It's not difficult to do. There is a technique to it. So stick around, stay tuned. I'll show you how to turn one of them into one of them. Same as squeezing. Welcome back. Okay, now these, take a close look at these. They're a chunk of billet alloy that's been machined into that shape. And they're just something you can buy. You can buy these on the net, and they're offset as well. As you can see, where the bolt goes through is offset to where the bars are, so you've got an option to put the bars further forward or back. Now they're all brilliant, they're fine. I'm going to replace the bolts on them because looking at the rust in there, they're chrome bolts. That will never do, so we'll put some stainless bolts. Now these, on the mount bolts, these are the ones that actually go down inside there. They've got a flat on them, as you can see, a little flat on there that fits into a flat in there so that doesn't turn. So when you put that on the bike and you hold that still, you can bolt them up. Now the problem I've got coming over here, as you can see, is bolting that through there. I've got too much. I've actually been cutting a little bit this thread already. That's where the thread was. So if you put the bolt on there, these are designed for much thicker yokes, like big slab yokes. And I think they're a universal part anyway. So I haven't got the ability to make or get a bolt like that, which is really, I mean, it's got 8.8, so it's a tensile bolt. It's quite a strong bolt. And what I've done is, this is the other one, as you can see, so that the thread will catch. I've pushed the thread further down. I've actually cut this thread. So I want to show you today, for those of you who've never done it and don't know how to do it, I want to show you how to cut a thread. I have done a video on it before, and if you go and buy yourself a little tap and die set like that, this is just a kind of tool shop one, nothing specific, and this stuff is available for any hobby mechanic. You can buy that sort of thing. This particular size, the bolts in question are 12mm by 1.75 pitch, so they're a coarse 12mm thread. And all I'm going to do is show you how to cut that thread. Done that one. Done that one already, and I need to bring the other one down. So I'm just going to carry on cutting, cut down this bolt, cut this thread further back, because that is the correct size. So when that's bolted through, I've then got enough thread to bolt right up against, and I can cut off any excess. I'm just modifying these to work. So pop it in the bench. If it's a regular bolt, ordinary straightforward bolt, you can just do the same thing. If it's an Allen bolt that you're doing, where an Allen bolt's concerned, it's a little bit more difficult. You have to hold the head itself, and that can pinch it. So use soft jaws, and I'm using them anyway. I just use a couple of pieces of copper bent over and wind them up nice and tight in the vise, so they ain't going anywhere. Good solid purchase. Now when you do these, if you've never cut a thread before, let me just basically show you the anatomy of what this is. It's a tap. These are taps. They cut a hole. They cut a thread down inside a hole, and these are dies, or this is a die. And the die cuts the thread on a bar or on a piece of rod, and turns that piece of rod into a bolt. As we get these out, you can see them. Now that's the die. You get loads of different sizes. Make sure you're using the right size and pitch, which I am. And if you look at it, as you can see there, looking inside it in the light, the first part of it, this thread, these little teeth in there, this is extremely hard. These are harder than a bearing, not like the outside of a bearing. It's extremely hard steel, so you have to make sure you're not cutting high tensile stainless. That has to be cut on a lathe or other purposes. But a regular mild steel bolt, just use a regular die. So pop it in. So you drop that with the cut end. you've got 3 little screws there, and the idea of them is you pop that in, you've got 2 dents there, which when you push these screws in will close that up and make it smaller. Now that doesn't make sense really, does it, in a minute? I'll show you why. So you pop that in to its hole, and the first thing you do is do the centre one up. Now when you do the centre one up, you're actually spreading that die out a little bit. You're stretching it open, you're pushing that nut into there and spreading it open. And the purpose of that is to actually make that 12mm into, I don't know, a 12.5mm. You're literally making it bigger, so that when you cut that thread down there, you're not cutting the whole thread, you're cutting just halfway in, if that makes sense. So a little bit of grease on it, and I know that those of you already who can cut threads and you do know what you're doing, I know those of you already are reaching for the comments button and saying I should be using a cutting compound. Yes, I know I should, I haven't got any. I did think I had some, but I don't, so there we are. I'm just going to use some grease. Now, I'm going to run this down, and you just turn it on like an ordinary, straightforward bolt. Get it started on there. And there we go. Now that will spin down the existing thread down to a point where there is no thread, so it will go to the bottom. Now because this little die is razor sharp and rock hard, you roll it down, get to that bottom point. There it is. Now that's got to the bottom of the thread, but if I keep pushing and then come back, can you come in close, Pen? What I want to try and do is catch some of the noise. Push that round and then come back. There's a little crack. So as you go around it, there's some WD-40 in there. As you go round, you're literally cutting the metal off, and you get little bits of swarf coming out, and they can get caught in the die and jammed under the next tooth, and they can damage the thread you're cutting. So go about 1/4 of a turn on a big thread like this, then come back on yourself, and that cuts all those little burrs, those little shavings, if you like. It cuts them off, snaps them off out the way, and they become flotsam underneath, which you can then just get rid of. So the technique of cutting any thread is get to the cutting point, then go round half a turn and back 1/4 of a turn, and then work it back and forth and just cut that thread. You're literally cutting fresh thread. It does feel a little bit savage if you've never done it before. It takes a bit of time to get used to. If you've got a proper cutting compound, which I should be using, then use it, because it's kind of a liquid graphite grease stuff that will assist the cutting process. The grease is as good as anything, just don't do it bone dry. Because if you do it bone dry, you'll damage the die itself. So just keep working it up and down, get back to the cutting face, and then cut a little bit more and back on itself. So that's the process. Keep going forward and keep cracking back on itself. You can hear it doing loads of damage, but it's not doing any damage, it's actually cutting thread. Right, now at that point, I don't want to do too long on this, you can see it's quite stiff still, because what I've done, get this out of the way, right, get that off, oops, out of the way. I'm just going to clean this off. Right, now at this point I've cut that much extra thread with the die. I've gone in, oops, got to match that one, so I've got a little bit more to go yet, but I've only cut half the depth. You know, you can quite see it, but the threads here, the little grooves, are not as deep as they are, so if I tried to put a nut on that, it would jam up on that. So I've still got to finish cutting it, but before I do anything else, I want to make sure I'm at the right depth before I start cutting a little bit further around. So I'm going to get right down to depth on this, and then I'll show you how we cut the full depth of the thread by bringing the sides of this in. Let's get that back down on the face. Right, back into the cutting zone, all the way down to where we stopped, and I've got to go down about another 4 threads. Okay, well that's now down as far as the length of the thread that I wanted. That's now down there. So now I'll show you what you do after that. This is the only way to cut a thread cleanly. You can go straight to the full thickness or full depth of the thread right away, but you'll probably damage the die and do some other damage to the actual job itself. So blow this swarf out of the way. Right. Okay, now on this particular one, do is bring that centre nut out so that that's the one that spread the die open. Once that's right out of the way, then push the other 2 in, and that shuts the die down. It literally squeezes that die smaller, and that will then cut deeper to the full depth. So when it's screwed right in like that, then that will give you the full depth. Now that is a correct M12 because we've screwed the 2 sides in to keep it in place. Let's put that in to hold it solid. Right. Now same goes again. Bolt back in. Just lube the thread because you're cutting the metal and it will just assist it on its way down. We're going to cut all over again, so that whole length of thread from there down that I've just cut, I'm going to cut it all over again, but just deeper. I'm going to cut deeper into it and make the full depth of teeth. That's why this, it should be a little bit more resistance at the top now because I'm down to the full depth of thread. There we go. Now you see now, just now, that's spun on freely because it was opened out. Now, it's actually bearing down on the top part of the thread because it's a chromed bolt, so it's taking the chrome off the bolt as well. Now you can't see any swarf. There's no swarf, there's no cutting going on. It's cleaning a little bit of the crap out of the thread, but here we go. Now we're into the zone, and you can feel when you get there, it starts to cut again. There we go. Now on the second cut, you can go in a little bit more gusto because you've already cut the thread. You're not cutting into fresh steel. The thread's already there. You're just opening it out a little bit. Now after a good 3 or 4 passes, it's quite hard work. Just make sure that the die will just literally spin up and down it because you're cleaning that thread up and making it a really nice, efficient thread that's going to stay put and not corrode up. There we go. So, there we go. So, that's the job. 2 of those. Now I've got to cut them down. The task now is that when that's in now, that now gives me a far greater amount of thread to bolt up. So if you look on here now, when that's bolted through the yoke, the nut's going to go all the way home and up that thread. As before, you can see the line where the original thread was. It wouldn't have caught it. So that's just a little modification, and the sort of thing, if you're building a Street Fighter or a custom bike or a chopper or anything, this is an hour standing there faffing around doing these 2, and I've still got to cut them down. So what I'm going to do now is wind the nut on in the old-fashioned way, and then cut them down, clean up the ends, wind them off, because at the moment they're way too long. They don't need to be any longer than about there, so I'm going to cut those down, and then we're ready to put them on the bike. Well, after that, then I've got to drill the top yoke, but for now, I'm going to cut those down, clean them up, and I'll show you when they're done. Right, so there we are. Cutting a thread on a bolt by extending a thread. Something you can do yourself a lot. It will save you a lot of grief. Often when you're doing stuff in your garage and you're bolting things on, you're modifying stuff, you find you haven't got a bolt for it. It's handy to have a big old box of spare bolts and nuts, and sometimes you just haven't got the right one. So to get yourself a tap and die set can get you out of an awful lot of trouble. It's about £60 from Machine Mart. You can buy them from just about anywhere, but get a good quality one because they are a hardened tool, so they've got to be very sharp and they've got to do a good job. So when you want a nice thread that comes out as nice as that, nice smooth clean thread that's going to do the job, you want a nice tool kit to do it with. The best tools make the best job, you know it works. So save up a little bit and get a right piece of kit. So those are now ready to go. In the next video, what I'm going to do, I just want to keep this short really, otherwise that's too much. This is the sort of thing, building a bike, that just takes ages. It's been an hour and a half, 2 hours messing about with these. Now they're done, they're ready to bolt on the bike. I've now got to get the top yoke off, get it all measured up where to drill, then I can bolt them in, get some bars bolted on at last, I can put the front end back together and I can move it back around again. So there we are. Anything else, Pen?
That's it, thank you.
Just wanted to make that a little how-to for you. Cutting threads is something, if you haven't ever done it before, it's a bit scary. Sometimes you can't buy the right bolt. I thought that might help you. So there we are. How to cut a thread yourself at home with a vise and some basic tap and die set. Take it easy, ride safe. See you next time.